Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you find the session informative. Thank you so much for putting your questions in the Q&A box as well. I will get to those very shortly. Just to introduce myself, my name is Elena, and I'm one of the recruitment executives for the Oxford MBA here at Said Business School. And I'm joined by my colleague Gisela, who will be helping me answer questions in the background. So thank you once again for putting those in the Q&A function. We will start from the very start, and hopefully we will have enough time to answer all of your questions. But if not, we'll be more than happy to help if you just send us an email at our email address. We will post it again in our chat just for your reference, and we'll be more than happy to speak to you. So just to get started with questions, I'll just get the very first one at the top, and that's about submitting an English language test or whether that candidate is available to submit an English language waiver. So essentially what the question says, I live in a country that doesn't consider English as its first language. However, I work in an American bank that conducts in English and have taken my undergraduate degree in the UK. Am I still required to take the IELTS? So I have a couple of things to say. So the first one would be that it depends when you've graduated from your undergraduate degree. And if this has happened more than 2 years ago, then unfortunately you wouldn't be eligible to submit an academic waiver. And that's because we consider your degree expired if it's older than 2 years. But then if you work in English-speaking environment where English is the main language that you use on a daily basis and you use all the 4 components of that language, then you are more than welcome to submit an English language waiver, professional waiver. We actually have a template on our website that is not in any way mandatory to use, but it might be very helpful for you to have a look at to see what we might want to see in your English language waiver. So you can certainly do that. And then obviously, if you feel that you don't meet the requirements that you need to take as as needed for the English language proficiency waiver, then you can certainly sit an IELTS test. But by the looks of it, it doesn't seem like you would need to take the test. So I would advise you to have a look at our waiver, and you can submit a professional waiver whenever you apply to our program. The second question is, how many attempts are allowed in an MBA entrance? So if applications are not accepted, can we apply again next year to the business school? So you can certainly apply next year. So you can only apply once per academic year. So if, let's say, you apply in round 1, that's actually coming up on 1st of September, and for some reason you are not accepted, then you can only apply in the following academic year. So for you to start in September 2027. So only once per academic year. Thank you for holding this seminar. I'm now preparing my application for round 1. Congratulations. This is really exciting to hear, and we look forward to receiving your application. My recommender is now in the process of preparing a letter of reference, and he said his company has some internal restrictions regarding using company letter format with header. Can he just write a letter without any header or footer and submit a signed letter? Would it affect the evaluation negatively in any way? Definitely not. So we don't necessarily require a specific format for your letter of recommendation, as long as it comes from one of your referees and they've signed it with a professional email address, then that should be absolutely fine. There is no specific format that we require. So they can write it in any format that they deem appropriate. There's no need for them to include a header or a footer in their letter of recommendation. We have a question about, actually a few questions about GMAT and GRE. I'll just try to answer the first one that's come up. It was mentioned that GRE scores lower than the reported median are accepted. What level of emphasis or weight does the admissions committee place on these scores? Is there a minimum below which applications would not be considered, regardless of professional experience, story, or progression? So this is a really good question. So we do, and we actually also have on our website just reference and benchmark scores that we have on the website based on our current class normally that is currently in place, that is actually currently studying. So those are the scores that we give out just for your reference to help you think of what would be a competitive score that we would love to see. But obviously, any scores that are lower than what we have on the website, those will still be acceptable, provided that the other components of your application I might be able to make up for that gap. So essentially, to explain myself in a different way, there's no minimum score required. We only advise on what competitive scores mean. So for example, for GRE, we deem 160 in the verbal section, 160 in the quantitative section as competitive. But by any means, that doesn't mean we won't be able to accept lower scores. It just means that if you have a lower score than what we deem as competitive, you might have to work on the other components of your application just to ensure that you are stronger in other areas of your application. And when it comes to GMAT, it's the same. So we have the same case for GMAT as well. We obviously see both scores equally as important. And so we will still review your application holistically. That means we will review all the components that you have submitted. So even though you have a lower GRE or GMAT than what we deem as competitive, we will still help you by reviewing all the other components and trying to find other strengths in your application where GRE might not necessarily be one of them. So I hope this is helpful. We have a question about GMAT Focus from Nova. Since the GMAT Focus currently does not allow test takers to directly download the score report, may I submit a screenshot of the report from the system instead? Yes, you can certainly do that. So this is actually what we want to see because at the moment when you apply, most likely your official score wouldn't have come through. So we're more than happy to see a screenshot of the test scores that you've achieved from the platform where you've taken your test. As long as obviously at the same time you have shared the official scores with us on your GMAT account, just so we are able to verify those online. So you're more than welcome to submit a screenshot of those. Like I said, as long as you share the official test scores online on the GMAT platform, so we are able to verify those whenever we process your application. I have approximately 14 years of work experience. By the time I apply, it will be 15. Am I still eligible to apply? So we don't have a limit when it comes to your work experience. So we still certainly welcome applications from any background with any sort of years of work experience. I would say the most important thing that you might want to consider is the cohort you are joining and how many years of work experience our current students have. Just because the average of our class is normally, I would say, between 5 to 7 years. So currently it's 6 years of our current class. So it might be something for you to think about, especially because you have 15 years of work experience. Obviously, we are trying to recruit a cohort of people that will all learn from each other, not just from their professor. Everyone will be bringing different perspectives, different ideas from their professional backgrounds. So it might be worth thinking about, will I be able to learn and, take value from my cohort, or will I be someone that will maybe benefit from a more advanced program? So that is, for example, an executive MBA. So from our perspective, that's certainly absolutely fine. So you can still apply. It might be, like I said, worth considering from your perspective what you're looking to get out of the program as well. So you might want to consider looking at the Executive MBA, which is a different program that we offer in the business school, and that has different requirements. So I will advise you to have a look at their website as well. A question about recommendations. Recommendations have to be submitted from a professional email, and personal email addresses are not accepted. My former supervisor is now retired and he knows me best. Would an exception be made in this case? So we can certainly accept a recommendation in this case, but our request would be for your referee to include just a quick note, just a quick line in the beginning of their letter of recommendation for you, where they essentially mention the reason why they're using a personal email, just so we are aware. And it would be useful to also mention perhaps that you've joined this webinar or you have already spoken to our admissions team and we have given you, let's say, the approval to do that. So a personal email address is acceptable as long as your referee mentions in the beginning of their letter the reason they're not using a professional email address. For people with more than 10 years of work experience, is there any ability to submit a CV greater than 2 pages? So we normally ask for just the 1 page if possible. And obviously, if you have, you don't have enough space to include your entire professional journey in just the 1 page, I would say maximum 2 pages is acceptable, not more than 2 pages if possible. So yeah, in your case, if you have more than 10 years, I would say stick to maximum 2 pages. So that would be fine. Let me see. Would the committee prefer to see 2 professional recommendations, a mix of professional and academic, or is it more about who can speak to your experience and potential most effectively? I'm just going to go through a few different questions now. Bear with me. So when it comes to the references, we don't necessarily require to see a particular mix. So we normally tend to see 2 professional references, but that's only because our applicants have been out of their undergraduate degree for several years. So an academic reference might not be as relevant in that case. But we sometimes also see a mix of professional and academic because some of our applicants have also completed perhaps a master's degree after their undergraduate or a different graduate program. And so in that case, for them, it might be more relevant also to include an academic reference. So this is completely up to you. It's entirely up to you. What we care more about is essentially obviously the content of those letters of recommendation and who your referees are, if they can speak about you, if they're invested in your career, if they can speak about your values and what you would be able to bring to the program, then this is more important than, I guess, what your references would be. So we certainly see, like I said, more often 2 professional references, but we also tend to see a mix of professional and academic. I would say 2 academic references, we don't normally see that. And that's because obviously we will review your work experience, which is a very big part of your application. So this is entirely your choice, but with that being said, make sure that whoever you pick, these people know you very, very well, are invested in you and in your career goals, and are still relevant to your career journey and to your post-MBA career goals as well. Okay. Does applying in different rounds affect the amount of scholarship funding? This is a really good question. So in a way it does. So I will explain why that is. So obviously in the beginning of the application cycle, all of our scholarships are available. So that only means your chances will be increased to be selected for funding. Obviously, this is not a guarantee that you will receive funding if you apply in our first deadline. And we certainly don't want you to apply if you are not ready. So make sure that your application is complete, you are ready to apply, you have submitted the strongest, most competitive application possible. And if that means you can't make it in stage 1 and you can only make it in stage 3, for example, then that's absolutely fine by us. As we progress in the cycle, the chances of receiving a scholarship might be lower, and that's because many of the spaces in the MBA will have been filled by a particular point, especially by our 4th or even 5th deadline, and so the chances of you receiving funding might be slightly lower. Obviously, with that in mind, our January deadline is normally the busiest deadline, and that's because at the same time we also have a deadline for many scholarships that we normally offer. So many of our applicants just decide to apply in January and apply to a particular scholarship at the same time, one that has a deadline in January. So if you are able to, like I said, if you have a strong competitive application that you've taken the time to work on, you can certainly apply in an earlier round, and that at the same time will perhaps give you higher chances of receiving funding. But by any means, this is not a guarantee that you will receive funding in any of the stages you apply, because it's a competitive process at the end of the day. So definitely, as we go into the application cycle, chances of you receiving funding will be lower. Thank you very much for the session. I was wondering whether scholarships are exhausted after a certain amount of application rounds, or whether scholarships are available and or equal in all rounds. This is a really good question. Thank you for that as well. So like I said earlier, some of our scholarships have a particular deadline, which is in January, and that coincides with our January deadline, application deadline as well. And we, on the other hand, have a few scholarships that are open all year round, so they don't really have a set deadline. And they tend to also be open to all applicants, regardless of gender, nationality, background. You will be able to see on our website, we have a dedicated page on scholarships, and you'll be able to see an individual page for every scholarship we have available. And for all of those scholarships, you will be able to see the details. So in terms of selection, eligibility criteria, in terms of how many we tend to give out every year, if there's a particular deadline, if you have to prepare an additional application as well. And in terms of the amount of money we can give out as well for that particular scholarship. So you'll be able to see that in a lot more detail. So definitely some scholarships will be exhausted essentially after January. And then some of the others, they tend to typically be open all year round. But like I said earlier, when we get to our final deadline, which is in March, we might not have funding available to give out. And that's because we've already had 4 stages. And I hope that has answered your question. Is there any open day at Said Business School that we can attend? Yes, certainly. We have one coming up in October. You can find it on our website. It's on the 9th of October, and it will be an open evening, so a different format than what we've previously had, that we are all super excited about, and you can register online. So you can check our website, our events page, and you can sign up for our open evening coming up. My recommender is working in a new company. We no longer work together. Will that be okay? Absolutely, yes. So if you're still in contact, of course, if that person is still connected with you, connected to your career goals, to your professional journey, to the fact that you are looking to apply for an MBA, so you are still in close contact, you can still certainly ask them to be your recommender, especially if you have worked together for a certain amount of time. So you obviously know each other very well, and they can speak about who you are as an individual, what sort of values you can bring to the MBA, and why you would be a good fit for the program. So you can certainly use them as your recommender. My reference letter, does it have to be from my professor? Can it be from my work? I've answered this question earlier as well. So certainly it can be, we accept a mix of a professional and an academic letter, as long as the person who is your referee can really speak about who you are and what you can bring to the MBA. And obviously they're still connected to your professional journey and your professional career goals. In the personal statement, is the preference of the admissions committee to receive one personal story that gives insight into who the applicant is, or is there scope to touch on different elements? So this is the one section where you have complete liberty to write about anything that you deem interesting. So essentially the essay question is, tell us something that you think the admissions committee might want to know about you, something that we can't see in your application otherwise. So I would say take the time to reflect on what the essay will be about, because it's your only option to really write about who you are, perhaps, your personal story, something that's interesting about you that will make sense for your application. Because about your motivation and your career goals and what you're planning to do post MBA, you have a dedicated section, which is the career development section. So I would recommend you stick to that, and then in your personal statement, your essay, you think about something else that perhaps might make you stand out from other applicants that we get. Okay, let's see. Can we get our profile evaluated by Oxford before applying? So depending on where you are from, depending on the team's capacity, we can certainly try to do that. I think the best thing to do would be to send us an email with your CV, and we will see whether we can connect you with a relevant recruitment team that could perhaps try to evaluate your profile. So it's a case-by-case basis situation. I could perhaps ask my colleague to include perhaps in the Q&A, sorry, not in the Q&A, in the chat function, just our email address, so you can all see. And then if you have any further questions, or if you'd like to have your profile evaluated by us, you can reach out to us on that email address. Okay. Let's see, any more questions? Okay. A question on colleges and accommodation. Do most MBA students choose to live in a college, and how does the college selection process for MBA students work? Thank you for that question. So I would say most MBA students tend to live in college. Some of them also live in private accommodation. Some of them live in university accommodation. So it's really a mix of the 3 options. When you become admitted to the program, you'll get access to our portal where you essentially have all the next steps that you need to complete once you've been offered a place. And accommodation is one of them. So we have a dedicated section on accommodation, essentially what are the accommodation options for you, how to get started on thinking about accommodation, and a few useful contact email addresses that you can reach out to for perhaps further information. So how the college selection process work, it's a really interesting process that only comes after you have committed to coming to our program. So once you've been offered a place, you typically have around 30 days to secure your place on the program, which is by paying a non-refundable deposit. And only after that, you are able to think of a college. Once you've paid your deposit, so once you've secured your place on the MBA, you will be able to pick a college. We have most of the colleges at the University of Oxford accept MBA students. And so you would be able to put a choice down, and then we would be able to send your application to that particular college. This process is completely independent from us, so we don't have visibility over it. So once your application is with the college, what we have to do is we essentially have to wait for their decision. And then obviously if the decision is accepted, so if you've been accepted, then you will get all the information you need from the college directly in terms of how to get accommodation. So if they have accommodation, which most colleges do, you'll get all the information directly from them. If you're not accepted by that college for a particular reason, which again is not shared with us, so all the colleges have different processes and different timelines, then your application comes back to us, and then what we do, we essentially allocate you randomly to a college that has availability at that point. So it's a really interesting process, but like I said, this only comes after you have secured your place on the MBA, so you don't have to worry about that at the application stage, let's say. Okay. With respect to professional references, I'm not sure how my current company would take the idea of me leaving the company for my MBA. Can I ask my past manager for the reference? I changed my company less than 4 months ago. So that's fair. We do encounter this situation, I would say, quite a few times, where you don't necessarily want to share with your employer that you're leaving soon, especially if you've just started a new role. So that's absolutely fine. I would say in this case, it's acceptable to go back to your previous company, especially because you've just left them a few months ago. So you can certainly request a reference from your previous job. That's absolutely fine. Okay. If we're looking to do a 1+1 MBA program, would the scholarship application process and coverage be any different? Thank you. This is a really good question, and I'm really excited to hear that you are considering perhaps our 1+1 MBA. So for the 1+1 MBA, there is a dedicated scholarship that potentially covers a tuition fee for both programs and including a living stipend on top of that. It's a really competitive scholarship, so I would recommend you have a look at that. But for the 1+1 program in particular, that's the only scholarship that could cover both tuition fees for both programs. So that's the only one available. You can still get access and apply and potentially get a scholarship just for the MBA in particular. So you would normally do your master's degree first, and then in the second year you do your MBA, and you can still get a scholarship to cover your MBA tuition, either partially or fully. So we have the same dedicated scholarship page on the website where you can have a look at scholarships for the 1+1 MBA and then for the MBA on its own, and that I would recommend you have a look at as well. Okay. Let's see if there are any more questions. For the career plan section, is it okay if I plan to pursue corporate path first, immediately post MBA, but then transition to entrepreneurship? Of course, that's absolutely fine. So essentially, the career development section is a section where, again, you have liberty over, because we would love to hear about your career goals, and that can mean multiple things. So you don't necessarily have to stick to one career goal. And that's actually something that we do advise our applicants to not just stick to just the one option, just in case maybe you change your mind during the MBA or maybe things don't work out for a particular reason. And so keeping your options open is really important. And so if you include a plan B or a long-term plan, for example, that you might want to pursue post-MBA over a longer term period, then you can certainly include both of those. And entrepreneurship is one of them, then that's absolutely fine. So that's entirely your choice, but that's acceptable for us. Could you please elaborate a bit more on the video competency questions that were mentioned in the video earlier? So at the very end of your application, there is an online assessment section that's on a platform called Kira Talent, where we basically want to get to know you a little bit better and see how perhaps you think quickly, how you make quick decisions, and just to get a tiny glimpse of your personality. So you will have 3 questions that are completely random, so all applicants will get different questions. And you will have to respond to those questions while recording yourself. So on the platform that I mentioned earlier, you will have some time to prepare in advance. So before you start the official timer, you are able to prepare, get used to the system, how it works. You can take some notes, perhaps, just to get your ideas in order. And then once you start the official timer, you have 90 seconds to respond to every question that you have. And like I said, it's an opportunity for us to get to know you, to see how you think quickly, and that's because you won't have a lot of time to answer. How you react to certain situations, to certain scenarios, and just to get, like I said, a tiny glimpse of your personality. And that assessment, alongside your application, we will review all of those components, and we will decide whether we want to invite you for an interview. I hope that helps. More information can be found on our website as well, a lot more detailed when it comes to the online assessment. Our recommendation is always not to leave it for the very last minute. So as soon as you've submitted in the application, as soon as you've uploaded your CV and the 2 email addresses for your referees, the link for your assessment should automatically be generated within 24 hours. However, as we get closer to the deadline, those 24 hours might extend. And so we wouldn't want you to, be concerned about not having enough time to submit all of those components by a particular deadline. And it's really important the online assessment is submitted together with the other components. So it's a mandatory component that has to be submitted by the same deadline that you're looking to be considered for. So we advise take plenty of time, don't leave it for the very last day, especially if your application is ready already. Take your time with the online assessment and don't leave it for the very last day because you might not be able to be considered if you've gone past deadline. Okay. I will have 3 years of work experience by the time I start my MBA. Does that put me at a natural disadvantage in the selection process? Definitely not. So we only require you to have at least 2 years of work experience that is full-time and that has been gained after you've graduated. So we don't consider internships in the work experience. So what we want you to think about is actually why you think the MBA is the right program for you at this moment in your career where you've just had the 3 years of work experience. So this is why we also give an average of work experience based on our current class, which is, like I said, 6 years at the moment. But that's just an average. So it's important to remember we have, applicants coming from both ends of the spectrum with just the 2 years and maybe applicants with on the higher end, maybe with even more than 10 years of work experience. So our advice is to think about your personal timing and why you think the MBA is the right program for you at this particular moment in your professional journey. And you having 3 years of work experience is absolutely fine by us, as long as you can highlight in the application, of course, what you've actually done in those 3 years of work experience. So we do also look at that, what sort of achievements you've had, what sort of projects you have worked on. So there's no disadvantage, of course. And like I said, that's your decision when you think the right time to apply for an MBA is for you. I missed the first part of the session. Will the recording of the session be available? Yes, definitely. So we will send a recording out to everyone who has registered, and you will be able to access it in your time. Are decisions for interviews and offers made known on the exact deadline date or by that date? So we take a few weeks after the application deadline to review and process all the application for the admissions committee to have a look at all of them and carefully consider them. And then we will release interview decision on a rolling basis. So in certain batches, for example. Final decisions are released on a particular date, which you are able to see on the website. So for every application deadline we have, we also have a final decision date that is linked to that. So final decision date is essentially the day where you find out, after all the interviews have been conducted, whether you have been successful in gaining a place on the program. But when it comes to interviews, they will be made on, let's say, a rolling basis. Okay, we have one final question actually, and this is great timing. We are coming to the end of our session. So the question says, if I'm intending to undertake the MBA to pursue a career in the UK or Europe, so that's a geographic shift, and have an idea of what kind of role I would like, but would be open to different industries or businesses, will this be seen as too vague by the admissions committee? This is a good question, actually. So I would say it's difficult to assess without seeing your full application and all the components that you have included, and obviously without seeing your career plan, let's say, on paper. We recommend to all our applicants to do their research before applying, just to determine whether the program can help them with their career goals. So it's a big decision that you are taking. It's a big investment from your end. So we just want you to make sure that you know why you're going into this process. And so as much detail and as much information as you can include as possible, that would be best. Of course, we know everyone is open to different options, different ideas that they might have. And so things can also change, of course. Like I said earlier, you might change your mind during the MBA. Things might not work out for a particular reason. But in the application process, I would say it's fine to be open to multiple things. But it might be best to try to be a little bit more specific, at least when it comes to, let's say, the 2-3 ideas that you might have in mind, just for us to be able to also discuss with you when it comes to a potential interview, what those ideas might be. I hope this makes sense. And if not, I'm happy to answer in more detail, perhaps in a follow-up email. Okay, so I think this might be it in terms of questions that we have answered, which is a lot. So thank you everyone for all the questions that you have addressed in the Q&A function. Like I said earlier, we will have a recording of this session that will be sent to everyone that has registered. So if your question hasn't been answered, or perhaps you would like to find out some more details, you would like to speak to us directly, feel free to send us an email, and you'll find our email address in the chat function. Thank you so much, everyone who has participated and addressed the question. Thank you, Gisela, for helping me with the Q&A. It was a really busy Q&A function, which we're super happy about. And hope everyone has a great rest of their day or afternoon. And we actually have another session today for those that perhaps would like to speak to us in more detail at 3 p.m. UK time. So we look forward to seeing you at the next session, and we look forward to receiving your application. Thank you, everyone.